We had heard from Celinda earlier, and I just put her name up there. So she is not a hand up waiting, and
okay.
I'll let you go and have a wonderful show.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. So welcome, everybody, to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Monday, November the 20th, 2023, and our call-in number is 563-999-3581, and press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us, and we would love to hear your comments and questions, because that makes this your show. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Heading into Thanksgiving season and offering thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation with you and to keep this dynamic of forgiveness expanding on a global scale. We see all kinds of crazy stuff happening in our culture, and yet at the same time, it seems that more and more people are stepping into, I'm ready to go to the next level in my process. I'm ready to stop seeing life through a filter of unresolved generational or cultural hostility and fear. Jeannie and I have been watching a video series on YouTube called Jamestown. Back a few years ago, we had a family gathering in at a timeshare near Jamestown and visited there. And it was kind of tragic to be there. It was an interesting place. We learned lots. It was fun. But one of the pieces of the puzzle that we learned, and I think we talked about this a little bit. This is probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even longer. We talked about the people who first came from England in particular, landed in Jamestown, and most of them were indentured servants. Indentured meant that they paid 7 years of their lives in labor in order to get on a boat and ride over to America. You know, who knows what all the reasons were they escaping religious persecution, whether, whatever was going on. But one of the things that really impacted me so deeply as we went through, they had kind of a museum, and they had a quote from a letter from a tax collector that had come over from England to check out the colonies. And in his report back to London, he wrote that these people who were the indentured servants who'd come over, he said they would be better off dead than the lives that they were living here. That what he observed was so tragic. And I put that together with, we've watched several series over the years of historically, or at least supposedly historically accurate happenings in different parts of the world. And the travesty and the tragedy of how in so many cases there was so little human life. Cases, the abuse, the power plays, the taking advantage of, the just simple rip-off for everything possible of people. It was just so insane, and that was one of the things that attracted us to watching this thing on Jamestown. It's a, if you're a Prime member, it's a first year's free, then you have to join their system. But in any event, it's been interesting to watch the dynamics of non-human life, how there's a group of people, and this is a repeating theme through all of these historical things we've watched, from stuff on Napoleon Bonaparte you've heard me talk about before, Versailles, if you've watched that series. There's a group of people who are still in touch with functioning as human beings, as love, and they tend to be rather accepting or subservient, not wishing to confront, not wishing to attack back, and how so many of these people's lives are just overrun by the brutal non-being minds based in rage and guilt and fear and other forms of mental deficiency, mental defect, literal mental illness. You know, we watch things like what happened in Nazi Germany and Mussolini, and we see that fascist mindset, which, you know, fascism is thought of as a political system. And fascism is not a political system. Fascism is a mental illness, period, from the word go. And, you know, each of these docuseries as we've watched over the years, you see this mindset of the fascist. I'm going to control you. If I can't control you, I'm going to abuse you. I'm going to do everything I can to take everything you've got, and I'm going to lie to you about how I'm here to do good for you. Is a basic bottom line. I was talking with someone this morning who had a friend that we've actually been processing this for a couple days last week, someone that he had back in his old drinking days, having come out of a family of a father in prison, extreme abuse, watching extreme abuse of his mother, and being in a system of friends whose families pretty much functioned the same way. And he started doing this work about 30 years ago. And in just one generation, his family system brought about such monumental changes that, you know, instead of children who think they deserve abuse, children who think they're worthless, children who think that's just the way life works, he has children who know who they are as love. He knows himself as a father as love. And it's just moved through like so much pain and trauma and generational hurt. And he was sharing with this family that he had known in those early days before he woke up to being a human being out of the abuse world, that a friend of his had just last week passed away, and he was asked to be part of the funeral. And the family system was that of the same kind of abuse that he had come from. And just how much work it takes to face, to disconnect from the world's drugs, whether it's alcohol or food or sex or whatever it is, to disconnect from using those things as anesthetics, and then to face the internal rage and fear that seemed like that's just the way life is, because that's what everybody in our community, that's everybody in this hall is doing. You know, it's all just part of life. And to realize that if that's one's history, our history doesn't have to be our future. Our history doesn't have to be the future of our children, our grandchildren, and their children. That in just one generation, monumental changes can be made. That while perhaps not perfect in any given instance, gives people the opportunity to step into really truly functioning as human beings, recognizing that when you hold a newborn child and you tap into the essence of that newborn, virtually everybody agrees that that newborn essence is the presence of love, and that when a child grows, they, there's that old poem that says they learn what they live. I address it a little bit in the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? One of the thoughts that I express there is you watch this child, this presence of love, and how they come forward even to their abusers as the presence of love over and over and over again. And nobody is born with hatred. Nobody is born with racism. Nobody is born with vengeance. They're learned realities that are programmed into and brainwashed into us as children through the dynamics of the power person. And the level of commitment that it takes, most everybody, when they hear that it's possible to move out of that mindset and literally live in a mind and a body and an emotional structure that is built on serenity and sweetness in life, like that's actually possible. And everybody who hears that's possible is, generally speaking, hooray, yes, I want it yesterday. I have $5 in 5 minutes. Tell me everything you know. And that's just not going to get it. If one has a history, when you start realizing that the types of abuse I was talking about that we see in so many historical documentaries and in so many family systems, those types of abuse don't come about as a result of a 5-minute happening in somebody's life. And those types of abusive, whether it's self-abuse, whether it's abuse of others, they don't end in 5 minutes of processing, 5 minutes of dealing with something in one's life. You don't just say, oh, well, now I'm finished with something that it has been perhaps 100 generations in the making. So, and there are so many circles in which, when you look at it, even those who are at least theoretically talking about this man who 2,000 years ago brought a teaching based in love that went beyond anything that existed in the world at the time. And yet, those who now, 2,000 years later, in the name of a man who said, fear not, at least 15 different times, in the name of a book where fear not in one form or another is expressed well over 300 times, a text that's designed ostensibly to take us back to our true nature as love, and yet the teachings that are presented there have such vile thought structures, such viciousness, as though, well, that's normal. Well, no, it's not God's fault that God wants to punish you, or that God's going to punish you. It's not. No, it's all your fault. And this idea of blame, this idea of fault, is at the root of the thought system that's supposed to take us back to love. And it's pretty crazy when you think about something that's designed to take us back to love has as its core punishment and threat. Blame, guilt, fault. In truth, if one were to shift into a conversation based in love, all thoughts, all words based on hostility and fear would disappear. All of the emotional traumas based in grief in pain and abuse are going to be gone from the conversation. And for most people, it seems like, well, how could that even be possible? How could that be done? Well, it can only be done if I choose to clean up the device through which I'm expressing. And one of the things we got into in our Mind Shifters and Still Point Breathing Club this weekend and processing work was to recognize that this body-mind unit is simply a device for expression. You know, if I have a $10 transistor radio and I enjoyed listening to Mozart, I can listen to Mozart on the $10 transistor radio, and, you know, I can kind of catch the music and I'm listening to Mozart. But if I, out there in the living room, have a $10,000 stereo system and I put Mozart on, I'm listening to Mozart. There's a difference. The unreformed reformers who have not done the work of cleaning up their own hostility and fear-based thought disorders, their own minds, will take a teaching on love and it will be filtered through the thought disorders of that mind. And what this work is really about is recognizing that this thing we call a body-mind unit is just an instrument for a vehicle for expression of our human lives. And a vehicle for the expression of love would be a vehicle that contains no energy other than that of the presence of love. And if the thoughts, the words, I mean, you don't have to know anything about anybody's behavior to know what goes on in their lives. All you have to do is listen to their words. In fact, words are so important. This man Yeshua 2,000 years ago said the power of both life and death is in our words. All you have to do is hear the words someone's speaking to know where they're going to lead you, where they're going to take you. And what I'm talking about here is not some sort of theory. I'm talking about actual, literal, physical, physics, physiology. The expression of our words comes into physiology through our words. And most people, until they start to clean the instrument up, are stuck in the thought disorders as, well, I just have to fight against, you know, evil. Well, if you become a fighter against evil, then you are a fighter. You are trapped in evil. And by the way, the word evil in Aramaic is simply an archery term. When you fired at the bullseye and you missed the target altogether, the scorekeeper would yell evil. Until these things are cleaned out of the instrument will tend to function out of whatever those energetic patterns are. So as long as fear or dread are attached to a negative fantasy in the mind, the world will bring to us the result of that negative fantasy. Ask and you receive was a really simple set of instructions. So whatever words, whatever thoughts occupy your mind, and the words at the root of them will set up a literal magnetic energy that will resonate into your space the experiences that correspond with that language. So that result, you know, probably the greatest atrocity done to us as human beings down through the ages, and that we've had hidden from us, is the fact that we are by nature creators. And as a creator, whatever your words, whatever your language, whatever your thoughts are focused on, the results produced by that are going to arrive right on time as anticipated until the cause of those things is removed. When we recognize that, there's a massive amount of work to be done, and that work isn't done in 5 minutes. It's a lifetime of work. Well, why would it be a lifetime of work? Why couldn't we just snap our fingers and change it? Well, recognize that your physiology, and now we're talking on the level of what we've identified as carbon-based memory, your physiology is a product of 1,000 generations. And if that's true, then the thought disorders unresolved in one generation are acted out, are spoken, are played out with the next generation. And if that generation has no tools with which to deal with that, no way to change it, then those thought disorders energetically, when you think of this as physics, on an energetic level, are simply strengthened and passed on to the next generation. And if you go to just the statement made in the ancient scriptures, and again, this is about genetics, the sins of the fathers are passed into 3 and 4 generations. That word sin, again, is an archery term. Fire at the bullseye, miss the bullseye, scorekeeper yells sin. Miss the target altogether, scorekeeper yells evil. You're off the mark. You're totally off with that idea. And so when you look at 4 generations, like, did anybody ever tell us that the base of our thinking comes from the energetic patterns where every thought, every construct of the minds of the previous 4 generations, which is 31 lives, is stored within our structures, is stored within this body-mind unit, what we call carbon-based memory. So when you recognize that you have that in your structure, then you've got a foundation from what you think and from which you are going to be inclined to act. If, as I, for myself, realize, there's nobody that I can think of in my previous generations who knew that if hostility or fear was going on in one's mind, in one's language, in one's relationships, that there were tools for undoing that hostility or fear, being free of it, and replacing it with the active presence of love. So the work required for actual healing, when you think about the war and traumatic memories, energetic memories that exist in the psyche of humans, when those unresolved dynamics are resonated into activity. And the very fact that they're there, because we live in a world of resonance, and basically one of the features of the law of resonance is that resonance creates motion. Resonance creates an attraction. So generational patterns based in hostility or fear, those energies held within the structure, by definition, all energy is motion. Everything that's ever happened in your bloodline that's stored within your genes is an energy pattern that's there, and these energy patterns are set up resonating energy fields, literal, measurable, high-energy waves. So if we hold unresolved those kinds of corrupt data in our psyches, then when those things are resonated into activity, and they will draw somebody in to play them out with us, the mind is going to show you those energies as thought disorders. But if you think that when a thought disorder is meant that, well, yeah, it's normal to hate somebody that doesn't do what you want them to do. It's normal to abuse somebody who doesn't give you what you want. If that's the kind of thinking, then those thought disorders turn into atrocities that, when they remain unresolved in the genes and the family systems, when they are presented in the teachings, I mean, even in churchianity, you hear so much about abuse and punishment. If those energetic patterns, those thought disorders, are reflections in myths, in modelings, in stories of people generation after generation, then one lives and dies in the desert of unresolved, projected internal trauma that ends up being expressed as destructive behavior, and to be played out within the family system over and over and over. And in the mind of the person who hasn't resolved those types of thought disorders within them, their minds will generate pictures out of their own thought disorders of what it thinks are others. If you listen to Carl Jung, he spoke about that as the shadow. And that ultimately, We need to deal with our own shadow selves, our own dark side, our own unresolved hostility and fear. And in a mind where love is restricted, a mind pursuing stuff, a mind pursuing success, a mind pursuing money, power, fame, where love is restricted or avoided altogether by the unresolved fear and hostility, the aberrant perceptions that come from that, we find people void of love and functioning out of an infected mind. And that mindset, when you go back to when they ask Yeshua what's most important in the law, he says you must have Rachman. He's talking about a mindset. He's talking about an idea that does not even have words in our English language, does not even have words in the Latin or the Greek from which we see what little we see of the Aramaic teachings. But the trauma-informed mind, one who carries unresolved generational or childhood trauma, defines and gives meaning, becomes the filter through which everything is seen. When the mind constructs its worldview and that becomes the filter through which it sees everything, through the unresolved pain and trauma within one's own genetics and one's own instrument, one's own body-mind unit, those thought disorders simply perpetuate. It's like being on automatic pilot. Now, when you think 4 generations is 31 lives, if you sit down and do the math, in just 30 generations, there are 1.6 billion people in your genes. Carl Jung said it like this: greater than all physical dangers are the tremendous effects of delusional ideas, which are yet denied all reality by our world-blinded consciousness. He says, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. We'll think it's coming from outside of us. All thought disorders based in any form of pain, hostility, or fear must be owned and ultimately removed in order to upgrade this body-mind unit so that it's set. Its natural state is that of serenity and love. Many hear the words of Yeshua, my peace I give to you. In Aramaic, the word wasn't peace. Peace is a war word. War and peace, they're connected. The word that he used was, my serenity I leave with you. You can't have serenity in your physiology where there are thought disorders based in hostility or fear. You can't have it. And of course, when you can't have it and you're in denial and you don't want to own that, you make up pictures about how everybody else is the reason that you're not in serenity, why your physiology is in pain. And until we have the tools to come out of denial, the underlying cause of that pain will remain hidden and inaccessible. And the noise that will cover up the ability to experience yourself as who you are. So the bottom line, and these, again, science is proving over and over and over again that these are energetic patterns that are passed on from generation to generations. The inclination toward violent emotions, thoughts, and behaviors are rooted in these inherited traumas. The shadow, as Jung talked about it. Multi-generational assaults reinforced through unconscious actions generation after generation, stored and projected repeatedly, projected on family, projected on friends, projected on enemies, projected on self. And these things are all connected in the mind. that can find no peace, cannot find its own serenity. Carl Jung says it like this: whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event. In other words, if I have an unresolved thought disorder within me, and that thought is resonated into activity by someone, I will use that thought disorder to project or to build my brain's image of that person, my mind's construct. And perception becomes a construct, and we put that construct on the inside of our eyeballs, and we replace the world of actuality, what's actually there, with those unresolved dynamics. So Jung says it again this way: we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. Well, how does that work? If I live in the world of perception instead of the world of actuality, then whatever actuality resonates in me, I paint a picture built out of that. The mind has this awesome ability to turn thoughts into pictures. And I build those pictures out, if I'm building those pictures out of thought disorders, then very disturbing pictures will show up in my eyeballs, and I'll talk about how everybody else is responsible for what's showing up on the inside of my eyeballs, because I think I'm actually looking out there, and you're not looking out there. You've never seen anything outside of yourself in your life, and you never will be. The only thing you get to see is the images your brain makes up. And if the images your brain makes up are based in thought disorders, then serenity seems like an impossibility. There's always somebody to blame for that. It's somebody else's fault. Again, in this culture, by the age of 4, virtually everyone is already a very dedicated, devout, religious person and members of the one world universal religion of blame. It's all everybody else's fault. Jung says this way: until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. How many times do we need to hear that? Well, in order to break through a mind locked into generational trauma, it's going to take a few times. Quote, again, Carl Jung: everything that appears to irritate us about others can lead us to understanding ourselves. So the foundation, the basis of our work, the reason we're having this conversation, the reason this conversation has been going on for 12 years now on this show, is to support having access to a different way of thinking, a way that supports them in freeing themselves of even the subtlest generational trauma, even in the subtlest thought that, oh, I'm in pain because Harry did this, Mary did that, Bill did that, Hortense did this. No, you've never been in pain about what anybody has ever done, ever in your life. That's a lie of your mind. The only reason you've ever been in pain is because you've allowed an energy into your structure, and or you inherited an energy in your genes that never belonged in you, and your pain is physiology calling out to you to be responsible and to move it out. You've got to quit that religion. You've got to be converted to a mind based in love rather than a mind based in thought disorders and hostility and fear in order to even start to function as a human being. So truly our whole purpose is to convert people. And conversion has nothing to do with the religion. You know, look at the newborn child, just watch them in the first couple of years, and they are totally, completely fueled by the presence of love. You know, if their diapers are empties and their bellies are full, they're fueled by love. How much abuse does it take to convert that mind into a hostility or fear-based mind? Well, if your mind has been converted into an hostility or fear-based mind, we're here to support you in being converted back to a love-based mind. Nothing to do with the religion, this idea of conversion. It's simply take us back to our natural state, plug us back into the mind functioning out of a connection to love. That's what that word Rachma meant when they said to Yeshua, what's most important in the law? He didn't say love your neighbor. He didn't say love God as yourself. He said of Rachma, when you think of the Creator, have Rachma when you think of your neighbor, and by so doing you maintain self. You get to maintain your human life. So when we talk about recovery with this work, we're talking about recovery of the original state of being, who you are as created love. So that's what we're here to do. Hope that makes sense to everybody. And Miss Jeanie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
We do have 2 hands up, and the first
awesome.
one
Let's
is
say hello.
First one is a new number. It's area code 646. You are on the air. I believe she said her name was Esther.
Yes.
Welcome, Esther. How are you, young lady?
I'm hanging in there.
How can we support you? What's on your mind today?
One thing I want to say that the things that you were saying is so true. Thank you for that.
You are welcome, and as Dr. Tim always says, deserving. Each of us is.
That's true. That is so true.
You know, whatever our history, the truth is we deserve to be treated lovingly, gently, and with respect, to treat ourselves lovingly, gently, and with respect, and to treat others around us lovingly, gently, and with respect. So that's our goal here. That's our purpose here.
Yeah. That is true. Now, the guy that I'm still feeling, just want to know, are we still going to be together, or is it just going to be the way it is?
Well, I'm not sure exactly where you're coming from. However, this show used to be on a different network where the lady who ran the network was about doing kind of psychic readings and such. And we've separated from that work because that's not that's not the purpose of our work here. We don't get into doing psychic type feedback. We're here to offer support for, and from what I hear you saying, it sounds like there's some conflict, some deep conflict in a relationship. And what we're here to do is to offer you the tools to resolve that conflict within yourself. And when you resolve that conflict within yourself, the tendency is for the places that, in the places where that conflict is shown up in our lives, that conflict tends to start to disappear. So that's more the direction we're going. If maybe you back when the network was in a different mode, your question would have been something that network would have been about answering. But we're not really equipped or into doing psychic type feedback or readings. But we can sure support you in learning if there's trauma going on in your relationship. We can certainly support you in eradicating that trauma from yourself, which will tend to eradicate that trauma from your life. And we've got a forgiveness. In the Aramaic language, the word forgive has nothing to do with this culture's idea of I'm going to let you off the hook for the pain that's happening inside of me. Because if I let you off the hook and everybody else in the world off the hook for the pain that's happening inside of me, I've still done nothing to deal with the pain that's inside of me. And as long as I hold pain inside of me, then I'll tend to reproduce pain in my relationships and in my world. When I go inside and start to remove those traumatic energies, then I begin to free myself from pain and trauma, and energetically I stop calling it for it to show up in my world. So the forgiveness process, as we're teaching it, coming out of the first century Aramaic language, is how I go inside myself and remove what tends to be these generational traumas. That's what's called forgiveness. We have, if you go to your app store on your phone and search for Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness, you'll find the world's only forgiveness app. And in that app, you can go into and do the worksheet process for starting to address what's going on inside of you that's reflecting outside of you. So that would be a starting point. We've got thousands of hours of archives of our radio show where we've walked people through all kinds of different traumas and processes for healing on the inside and then changing the reflection on the outside. You can go to our website, whyagain.org. There are 20,000 pages of information on this topic, and everything that we've got, pretty much everything is available free. There are some, paid ways to participate in the work, but we've also, done our best to make everything available as freely as possible. So if you go to the website, there are all kinds of resources. We've got a YouTube channel with dozens of videos, all designed to introduce you to and support you in going through the work of healing through your relationships. In fact, that's the name of one of our workshops, Healing Through Relationships.
Okay. And you said that's WHI-OR?
Our website, WHY, the name of my book is Why Is This Happening to Me Again? WHY, and then the word again. Whyagain.org is our website. And if you go to YouTube, our YouTube channel, if you just type in Michael Ryce, you'll find our YouTube channel, and it's MICHAELRYCE. The forgiveness video, our whole workshop is there. There are dozens and dozens of videos that you can start to work with. And in particular, the forgiveness worksheet process is the most important tool we teach. There's all kinds of support there for learning it. And then, of course, if you start to engage with that and questions come up, the purpose of this show is to keep answering your questions and give you as much support for healing in your life as we possibly can.
Okay. Thank you so much.
It's a delight to hear from you, and I hope we'll hear from you again. And as you start to use the tools, if questions surface, it'll be a delight to talk to you again. Thanks for being with us. All right, Miss Jeanie, you've got another caller?
Well, it was Miss Susan, and her hand went back down, so she might have been just left over from Dr. Tim, but I'm going to turn her microphone on. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
Susan's always got some good thoughts.
Well, I have hearing aids, and if I touch my ear a certain way, it hangs up the phone. So that's what happened, Jeanie. Okay. Well, I asked Dr. Tim on his show, but you've been talking all around words that could be used instead of the word love, and he said complete acceptance was one. I'm trying to find synonyms to the word love that I can use in my little vestry meditation that I'm preparing for. I gave it to Tim Bingham the other day on a walk, and he said, the word love is just so misconstrued, as you say too. Let's find some other words. And you said mindset. Of course, that would need some defining, but you're talking about setting Rahma. But I'm not going to go into what Rahma is in this 3 to 5 minute long meditation. Serenity, acceptance, complete acceptance, mindset. Anyway, I'd love some more words if you had them.
Tell me more about the context of it.
I want to introduce the concept of Aramaic forgiveness without freaking out the clergy by saying that this is the Aramaic definition, because the argument there is that every Aramaic word depends on how you say it, which syllable you emphasize. It may not mean what you're saying it means. However, I think Jesus demonstrated Aramaic forgiveness on the cross when he said, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. They are innocent. To see another person's total innocence, not even name, I think it's the Course in Miracles that says, if you pardon or let off the hook, that's a Michael Ryceism, you are actually making the sin real. Jesus doesn't make any sins real. He makes the innocence the topmost major reason for forgiveness. It's just seeing someone in in their, as Tim Bingham said, how about using the word soul? You see them in their soul, their pure soul, the holiness of them. I love all that. I'm trying to put it together so I don't freak anybody out. But also, I think the problems of the world stem from our misunderstanding of the word forgive. It has so much ego in it. I'm taking the high road, you scumbag. I mean, it just doesn't do the trick. Yeah. So I'm just fooling around. My meeting isn't for a week or two more, and I've done more meditating on this with many side trips, which have all been great. It's like I have my own little radio show going on in my head, but I need to touch base with reality every once in a while, which is you and Tim, Dr. Tim.
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to do.
Another word that comes to me, when we ask, and it's usually Jeanie when we're traveling, we'd ask at the beginning of each "Why is this happening to me again?" workshop for words that described the energy of the newborn child. And one of the words we would get would be innocence.
Yeah.
And we usually convert that word, break it in two to inner sense. That when we touch into the truth of who we are, if in fact, maybe another way to say it might be to touch into the aspect of this person that is truly made in the image and likeness of the Creator.
Mm-hmm. That's nice.
Am I able, instead of seeing them through the filters in my mind of hostility and fear, can I see them through this filter of innocence?
Great.
And
that's great. Filter.
There's, Paul, you can tie it in with, Paul talks about how we see as though through a glass darkly.
Yeah.
What would we describe the glass that gives clarity but the glass of innocence? And that relates to the inner sense that was given to us in our very creation.
Yep.
And that unfortunately people often surrender to the dynamics of hostility and fear in their world, in their lives.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Being is another word that I often use, is that, we've got being and we've got non-being. And non-being would be a self, If you tie this idea into, Yeshua talks about how in order for you to live, you've got to die. What needs to die? The non-being self, the self, the appearance of a self based in hostility or fear that replaces the truth of who we are.
Oh, that's nice too.
Another piece that comes to mind that might fit and tie into it, especially take it into a church group, would be, that passage in the scene with the high priest servant outside of Gethsemane, where Yeshua directly addresses Peter and calls him Satan. Yeah. And then he defines what he means. You think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God. So can we see this person in their original innocence through the mind connected to the Creator? And if the Creator is love, then we're looking through the mind of love.
Original innocence.
Original innocence. Yeah, it's where we all started. And everyone that comes in with it has it available. And sadly, the purpose of the world, and sadly, even more sadly, too often, the purpose of so-called Christianity has become to beat that original innocence out of us by telling us how guilty and bad and wrong and evil and, on and on and on goes the list, how helpless, how hopeless, how, impossible it is. You've got to rely on, that whole game is an atrocity.
Right.
So original innocence, original blessing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Those are good.
So I hope that helps to move things in the direction.
It does. It does. I'm just hoping.
Sweet.
I don't want to use. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I just want this to flow, this little talk. I don't want to read notes. I just want to talk to my friends. I'm going to invite them to close their eyes, take a breath, settle in, and put their attention into their heart. I think people hear better with their heart. So if I can get away with that. So what were you going to say?
You want a piece of music to go with it?
Wow.
Something you could start with or finish with?
Well, I'd love to hear what it is. I probably won't. My time is limited. And also it's on Zoom, which the sound quality, you talk about transistor radio, it's not worth trying to do it.
Right.
But I'd love to know the piece.
Well, you could maybe do a screen share and bring it in, but if you do a search on YouTube for, and I don't remember his name, Jeanie brought it up the other day, but I don't recall it. Jeanie, maybe you've got it on the tip of your tongue, but there's a song, Open the Eyes of My Heart, by a 10-year-old autistic boy that is just awesome. It is
That's
such
the one
a
you said
sweet...
was on...
I was thinking it was on AGT, but whatever it is, if you just put in 10-year-old autistic, Open the Eyes of My Heart, and this little kid's voice is just so amazing. And you know, this is an autistic blind child, and
wow.
When I want to open my field, I go back to that song. I've done it over and over and over again.
Well,
it's
I'll
really
listen
powerful.
to it. That's great. Thanks.
Cool.
I just
Sweet.
put the
And
YouTube link in the notes
Thank you,
for today.
Jeanie.
His name is
feeling,
Christopher
Jeanie?
Duffley. I'm doing good.
Oh.
I had physical therapy this morning and got a workout. So
Good. Good. Yep.
Rocking on.
Good.
All right, and if as you develop it, if you want to send it to me, I'll have a look and see if I have any thoughts I can add to it.
I think I sent you an early rough draft ages ago, and thank goodness you didn't pick it up and run with it because it wasn't ready enough to send you. So, if I feel as if it's ready enough.
When you send me something by email, if you would, like right now my email inbox has got about 300,000 emails in it. If you would just send me a text that says sent you an email today, then I'll know to look for it. Otherwise, oftentimes, sadly, due to my inefficiency at handling my inbox, it gets lost in the shuffle. So, but just send me a text saying you sent it, and I'll be sure to look.
Okay, good.
Cool. All right. Any other thoughts for you today?
Well, I have a teeny thought about our friend Michael. We have a game plan because Tim and I are now officially on this independent living thing. And we were thinking that inside of 5 years, provided our health holds, we will go there and sell the house and get rid of a lot of stuff. But that means making sure Michael has a secure place to live. And there's been a lot of, this isn't good and that isn't good, kind of nothing is right. So we thought, well, we want to set you up. And he says ultimately he wants a good van that he can live out of, even though I think we're talking him out of that because he's 68 or 9 years old. Living like that is not going to be so great. So
yeah, it's a pretty rough way to go.
Yeah, it is. So we're setting up a savings account for him. He tends not to save any money because he just doesn't think about it that way. So I said, what if I were the trustee for you and you could give me a goodly little chunk every month that you wouldn't even see and it would be protected? And he said, I'm willing to do that. So January 1st, we're setting up a little trust fund savings account for him. And I think inside of 3 years, he'll have enough for either a good down payment on a room somewhere or a rental or subsidized living or a van, but in any case, he'll have something. So that's just what we're doing right now. And
Sweet.
He's been a gift because I have to do a lot of work on myself in order to hold love active and present, because the impulse to clobber is very lively in my being. And
what a wonderful gift.
it's a gift. It is all around. So, but I do a lot of deep breathing, Michael.
Yeah. So who was it that taught you that clobbering was a solution to something?
Oh, heavens, you know the answer. It's our modus operandi. Yep,
no?
The solution is to
Maybe
clobber.
it's time for the next layer of work with your power person then.
Oh, I thought I had pretty much... Okay, go ahead. Tell me what to do. I thought I had been through all that.
Well, if you've been through that, but your mind still feeds an inclination to, as you say, clobber, then there's more, that clobbering energy is going to have to be sooner or later forgiven for you to be in total serenity, to really achieve serenity in yourself, as it's possible to do. And I know you've made huge strides from old days where it took pills to keep that stuff down, where you allowed it to come up, and maybe it's just time to go to the next level.
Okay, Michael, I have a teeny testimonial. Even while we're doing the work, even while it looks very messy, there are healed byproducts to ourselves which just make life so much more wonderful, even if the mess is still there. The times of feeling in the present, clear mind, joy, appreciation, all of those things seem to be popping out, even though I'm definitely still in a big mess with not only, I had a run-in with somebody in the grocery store today, but the tools did it. Oh, I said, what do I need to, what's required to deserve this free turkey? I didn't know you have to have a certain amount of points. And she said, what is your question? And I said, I don't understand if I qualify for having this turkey. I don't understand your question. Just take the turkey. And I said, well, but if I get to the checkout, I had to breathe and stay nice. And I stayed nice is what I'm saying. I stayed nice and I thanked her. But she was definitely in not a very happy ego state when she was talking to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, holding the space for her and for you, young lady, for an awesome Thanksgiving. All right, we appreciate you.
Are you going to be on Thursday? Okay, I know you guys. All right. Okay.
No, actually, we're going to do a recorded show, I think, aren't we, Jeanie, Thursday?
No, I thought we were going to do a live show. We weren't going to do the book club.
Oh, right. That's right. Okay. Yes. We'll be on Thursday. Yes,
all right.
ma'am.
I might be able to make it.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, good.
All right. Blessings. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome